Is social media fueling a pushback in vaccinations in some quarters? We speak to experts on both sides of the debate. Should the media take part in active politics? Are journalists and talk show hosts exempt from playing politics? As usual, you can look forward to our standard features, the video of the week and the game changer. Hello and welcome to Media and Society on SABC News, independent and impartial. This is where we give you the platform to probe how news is covered and angles are determined. My name is Rams Mabote and I'm your host. This show is not complete without your say. Connect with us via our social media channels and share your views and concerns about how the media works and what we feed you. Hashtag SABC Media and Society and call us on 011-714-6841 or 6842. To vaccinate or not to vaccinate, social media and the media in general has been abuzz with anti-vaccination banter. According to an article published by The Guardian, social media giant Facebook has been accused of perpetuating and allowing misinformation about the pandemic and the vaccine to spread on its platform. Founder Mark Zuckerberg says the organization has removed more than 18 million posts containing misinformation from their website and is urging for vaccine literacy. Meanwhile, recent South African Health Product Regulatory Authority report has confirmed that 29 people who died after receiving the COVID-19 vaccines passed away due to pre-existing comorbidities and not from the jab. This finding comes at a time where claims about the vaccine-related deaths have been gaining traction in social media with minimal evidence to show that jabs and sudden deaths are linked. Joining me to discuss this further is Joan van Dijk, senior health reporter at Begisisa Center for Health Journalism, and Nick Hudson, founder of Pandemics Data and Analytics. Just how serious is this problem, Joan? Good morning to you.
Yes, so to link a death to a vaccine definitively is a specific and very formal process that the health department and a special advisory committee to the health department actually follow to link a death to a vaccine definitively. It's not just about, okay, someone passed away after getting a vaccine. It's a far more complicated process than that. Our medicines regulator, SABC, has gotten 53 reports of death, and they have investigated all of those, and all of them were coincidental, which means that they didn't die because of the vaccine. They actually passed away because they had underlying illnesses, or perhaps they got COVID. They had COVID unknowingly when they were vaccinated. No COVID vaccine can give you 100% protection against COVID, so it is still possible for that to happen. So it's a long process. It's a full process that happens. So it's not as easy as it's not quite as simple as you passed away after vaccine. It was definitely the vaccine that caused it.
Why should I and many people worry about what people say on social media? These are people who can't account. As opposed to if I said something on this platform, we know the SABC can account. Why should we worry about, most of the time, faceless people? Some of them are robots, but it's social media. Should we worry?
Yes, definitely. I think there's always a lot of noise on social media, but I think the official sources is still the best place to get your information about this. I think the health department's communication hasn't always been that clear and that good, but the most mainstream media outlets, I think, have done a good job of explaining the side effects and what you can expect and what you can do if you do experience side effects. SAPA has got their Med Safety app. There are lots of official routes you can take to get good information.
Nick Hudson, you're joining us from the Pandemics Data and Analytics. Good morning to you. Are these sounding of alarms too loud? Is it too much of of a hoo-ha out of nothing?
No, there is some validity to sounding the alarm. What we see in the United States and Europe is that the vaccines are associated with deaths that are without precedent. It's important in all of this to remain balanced and proportionate. There's been such an absence of proportionate response in the whole COVID debacle. Our view as an organization is that there are two groups of people for whom the vaccination should not be indicated. Those would be people who've recovered from COVID. They enjoy robust and durable immunity that is broader than is obtainable from the vaccine. And young healthy people who face negligible risk from the disease. In light of the fact that these are experimental use authorizations, that key components of normal medical trials have not been conducted, we think that it is better to proceed with a slightly measured approach. So we're in favor of vaccinating the vulnerable minority in the population, but we think that when it comes to vaccinating recovered people, well, that's just crazy. And vaccinating young people also does not make sense on a risk-benefit basis.
I'll tell you what bothers me, Nick, is that I consume a lot of information. I would read something from Italy today and something from Israel this evening and something else from the US and something from our country. And even the reporting, even for those that believe in vaccination, let alone the anti-vaxxers, confuses me. So at some point, shouldn't we leave it to the individual to believe what they want to believe and take their action?
Yes, I mean, it's very important to proceed with informed consent. But when the regulators themselves are not giving accurate information, that's very difficult for people. And I deeply sympathize with people who are in that position and finding that they get conflicting information. One of the problems is that vaccine stakeholders have significant funding into our public health regulators and into our media, such as Bekasita. You've got people who own and profit from the vaccines controlling the media narrative. And that's a major problem. We don't think that informed consent is really being obtained. People are not being informed accurately about the risks and benefits. Advocating for recovered people to be vaccinated is completely contradicting basic immunological wisdom. We know very well that recovered people have robust immunity, and this keeps on being denied by these organizations that are funded by vaccine stakeholders. So I feel desperately for the man in the street who's trying to make sense of it all, Rand.
Joan, isn't that the issue? Isn't the issue the fact that perhaps the pharma wars are playing out in the media space, and we then get caught up depending on who is on the side of whom, who is funded by whom?
Yes, exactly.
Well, I'm asking this of Joan, Nick. Joan, that question is aimed at you.
I think there is, we know from other fields of research, not only COVID, that funding does have an effect on research. Where the research's funding comes from is a little bit swayed by where the funding comes from. But when it comes to the media, I'm not quite sure. Could you give me an example of people who are you saying that the media is backing pharma and not giving a balanced view of what the vaccines are? I'm not quite sure what
I'm not making any accusation. I'm saying, is there possibility that those who fund, and Nick in particular mentioned that Bekasita is funded by some of the vaccine people. I don't know for sure. You can speak for yourself. But I'm saying, could this play out in the media controversy, the fact that what lies behind the media debate is who funds whom?
Well, no, definitely from our perspective, that's not the case. We are funded by the Gates Foundation, but we have very, very stringent editorial policies, and we have no interference from them. We have just always followed kind of where the evidence goes and try to report with honesty about the risks and benefits. So certainly that's not the case at Bekasita.
By the way, to both of you and everybody else watching, very important disclaimer: I am vexed. So I'm doing this as a journalist. I'm not doing this as an anti-vaxxer or a vaxxer. I'm at least half vexed. One part of my body is vexed. I'm going to vex again for the second time shortly. There is a video making rounds of Dr. Susan Vosloo, who makes controversial statements regarding the vaccine. And this video has received a backlash and deemed as dissemination of dis or misinformation. Do you know about this video, Joan, and what's your view?
Is this the video of the heart surgeon who was making claims about it, about the vaccine?
Yes.
Yes, I do. I do know about that video.
What do you make of it?
I mean, I think it's always it's a difficult situation when a medical professional is making claims like that. It seems like the rest of her colleagues have kind of tried to balance out her statements. Yeah, I obviously didn't agree with what she said in the video. I would say that the vaccines are fine.
Nick, some people make very outrageous statements about the vaccine and its effect on people. Now, that is also very irresponsible. In spite of the fact that I need to make my own educated choices, should we perhaps get to a point where reporting about the vaccine should reflect both arguments at all times, irrespective of who is reporting? So if it were on the platform of Pegasisa, they must tell me about the good, the bad, and the ugly of vaccinating, and the good, the bad, of the ugly of not vaccinating. If it's the SABC media and society, we should do the same. Should we be doing it that way, perhaps?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. One of the problems in this whole discussion is that as soon as anybody raises a legitimate safety concern or procedural concern, somebody turns around and shouts at them that they're being an anti-vaxxer. I mean, I've had that happen to myself, and I'm most profoundly not an anti-vaxxer. Similarly with Suzanne Vosloo's video, there are points in there that are contestable and that I would probably disagree with, but there are also some very good points. And instead of dealing with the factual matters at hand, there's kind of a very shrill, shrieky cancel culture that emerges. And suddenly there are these letters denouncing her and articles absolutely trying to, mount a character attack on her. One thing you can see about her is she's sincere. She's not trying to mislead anybody or misinform anybody. She may have opinions that are wrong, but the mature way of going about science is to debate those opinions, not to stand there shouting at everybody on social media. And I think the polarization of the discussion is part of the problem that's leading to the confusion, because nobody believes an organization that says there should be a jab in every arm. That's a ridiculous point of view. It's extreme. And nobody really believes an organization that says that all vaccines are bad. And it's very hard to find that middle ground because there's this kind of tendency to polarize and jump on people.
So I'm going to take a short break. And when we come back, I want us to continue on this conversation, but to focus more on what could be done better. Because I think we could all throw stones at one another, but there has to come to a point where at least those who report on these things do it in a proper way. So we take a short break and continue. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us here on Media and Society. We continue with our discussion on whether vaccine disinformation is fueling vaccine hesitancy. Remember, you can contact or make connection with us on social media via hashtag SABC Media and Society. Alternatively, call us on 011-714-6841 or 6842. We continue our conversation with Joan van Dyk, Senior Health Reporter at Pegasisa Health Center for Journalism, or Center for Health Journalism, and Nick Hudson from Pandemics Data and Analytics. But before I go back to my guest, I've got tweets because we've asked you to participate and you have sent us your tweets. Shangan Prince, there's no misinformation around the vaccine. There's just too much secrecy. I don't blame the hesitation that's going on. Hashtag vaccine rollout SA. The musician, the very fact that they've hired influencers to persuade people into taking the vaccine tells you something ain't right. Government has never cared for black people that much, not about our health even. They inject you with something that doesn't work. and they say the reason it's not working is because of those who are refusing to take it. You mean you really believe these lies? That's staccato. And King Govs says, since you all think the government is trying to kill y'all so much with this vaccine, please tell me what exactly do they stand to benefit from the death of you? Who exactly benefits of 40 million plus people suddenly die for no reason? I now can say things like y'all. Let's go back to my guest and start with Nick. And I want to start, Nick, with the last comment. Should we? I mean, who would want to kill anybody? Why would I want to believe people who scare me about what these vaccines would do? Would really governments around the world collude to kill people, and the media en masse joins all these governments to misinform us and scare us?
Yeah, well, there's definitely been deliberate programs to try and scare people. You know, when the whole COVID thing came out, all of the pandemic respiratory virus guidelines that countries had in place were thrown out. We proceeded down this route of trying to scare people into their homes with lockdowns and force them to wear masks and so on. And this has been unprecedented in medical history and completely against the guidelines. So the misinformation by governments in order to scare people has been profound. It's well documented. It's all kind of wash. I do not believe that governments are out to kill people. It is a depopulation strategy, as some people have opined. But what I do think has gone wrong is very heavy-handed and coercive strategies, such as talking about vaccine passport, not permitting people to go into certain places, they've immune. You know, that kind of strategy makes people suspicious, drives a degree of vaccine hesitancy. And again, it's unprecedented policy and contradicts, you know, the any number of established principles of public health, including the Nuremberg and the Syracuse principles. You know, this is just simply not good public health practice, and the coercive practices should be stopped immediately, in our opinion.
Joan, one of the tweets says there's under-reporting. I find it strange. I suspect there's over-reporting, but maybe because I consume a lot. Where's the balance? Are we under-reporting? Are we over-reporting? And in the process, if we're over-reporting, are we scaring people unnecessarily?
Well,
under-reporting the pandemic?
Globally.
Nick, the question was to Joan. I'm not sure whether I make myself clear every time I ask her. Sorry about that. So, Joan, please go ahead.
So you're saying is the pandemic or the COVID statistics? What do you think?
Well, generally about the pandemic, the statistics, the deaths. One of the tweets says there's under-reporting, so people don't know enough about what is happening. I sit here and I think there is so much. In fact, I tend to get confused about how much I consume. Look at my desk. So my point is, where's the balance? Are we under-reporting? Are we over-reporting? And if we are over-reporting, are we scaremongering?
I think I know there has been a little bit of research done about how the communication was done in the beginning of the pandemic when we went into that first lockdown in March last year. That definitely did scare people the way that happened, and probably wasn't the most effective way to communicate the risks of this virus. But when it comes to reporting in the news, this is a huge, unprecedented global situation. So it has been in the headlines a lot, and the reporting on all the different aspects I don't think has been unnecessary. I think the tone of the reporting sometimes could be misconstrued by people as scaremongering. So yes, that's kind of my view on that.
Since I've become very aware of Peggy Cesar, Joan, I must tell you that I've learned quite a lot about how you guys report about this and other health issues. You've made me clearer on issues. But do you believe, in general, the media, and I don't want to focus on social media because, again, I've got this attitude about social media that I don't know who I'm talking to, but when I speak to Peggy Cesar, I can point at Joan. Do you have a feeling that the media are reporting about the vaccine in particular very clearly in a way that leaves everyone understanding what they're dealing with?
Yes, I think there's been an effort to do that. I think not many museums are set up with health reporters and health editors, and people had to adapt very quickly as most of the world, I guess, was adapting to this situation. So at times, I do think there's been a lack of contextualizing and explaining the processes around the public health decisions and the technology that's being used, for example, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page about how everything works. But in general, I think there's been a really a good effort to get information out to people.
Nick, I sat with my colleagues preparing for today, and one of the things that kept on coming up is this question that is the media intentionally misinterpreting the issue of vaccine hesitancy? Is it not reported openly, fairly, and objectively?
Yeah, I don't think there is objective reporting going on. It's very one-sided. There's so little debate throughout this COVID process. We try to present a very one-sided narrative that is always consistent with where it's funding from. And that's been a major failing. In such a significant event with such far-reaching ramifications for so many South Africans who've lost their jobs and their livelihoods and have had absolutely destroyed, you'd think that there would be public debate and engagement. But whenever we have tried as Panda to set that up, there's an absolute refusal to debate and engage, and instead an attempt to deplatform and censor people who disagree with the government narrative. And
Nick, if I may interrupt you, Nick, do you solely blame that on the funding? Could it be that people just don't want to hear your opinion? Does it matter that they're funded by a specific person?
These outlets are consistently funded by the same organizations and depend on the advertising that has come from governments around COVID. And so the editorial staff, even if they wanted to, are very reluctant to depart from the official narrative. And that's an enormous problem.
What about then other sources? Are you dependent solely on mainstream media to raise your views? I mean, there are other platforms. You could use your own online media websites and stuff like that to educate people, or you think you won't have enough reach?
Well, the social media platforms who are owned and funded by the same people all over again, have been relentlessly censoring anybody who was critical of lockdowns or the various mandates of vaccine passports, of coercive practices around vaccination. They have relentlessly censored them. And so the problem exists there too. And that's really part of this whole find ourselves in, that there's only one side of the argument presented. And as we're discovering with every passing day, that argument is substantially wrong.
I'd like us to reach some conclusion of some sorts, and hopefully a conclusion that leaves us with something stronger to work on. Joan, this question is for you. What could be done better going forward from a point of view of reporting on the vaccine, but also allowing more voices to be heard?
I mean, I think so on the question of honesty and being kind of transparent about vaccines and all the processes has definitely been an issue. So I think the communication from the health department, any kind of semblance of not being totally honest definitely drives people's concerns and hesitancy about the vaccines, which is kind of, you can understand because everything happened so quickly and it's all new, all those kinds of arguments, that you want people to be more honest about the processes and why they're thinking like that. So I think there could definitely be better communication from the government itself. When it comes to media, I can only really speak for Becky Tisa, how we see it, is what would the other perspective of how would we be objective about the vaccine really? I don't know what the other side of this argument is. We have been kind of critical of some of the vaccines. We've been critical of the studies and the way they were conducted and all the processes that goes into producing scientific knowledge. We've been critical of lots of that. But we've also not, I don't know if it wouldn't be fair to then to also balance that argument out with, but some people think it doesn't work. So I do think that we've struck a balance with being honest and being critical of the processes going into the vaccines, but also following the evidence. And I mean, that has no bearing on where our funding comes from. We're not dependent on adverts at all. We have more than one fund. We have 5 different donors.
Joan, unfortunately, I have run out of time, and I know it's part of our fault. We couldn't connect earlier, but we have to wrap it up here. Thank you very much to you, Joan, and Nick Hudson. It has been a very great conversation, and I wish you both a great Sunday further. When we come back, we speak to Lukhona Mnguni and Themba Siputokele on media and politics. The media is a vital organ in the creation and the development of democracy in any country. They shape public opinion by providing citizens with information which influences the process of making informed decisions. However, what happens when journalists become facilitators of political conversations with politicians and want to influence political decisions at the very same time? On Wednesday, 2 well-known media practitioners, ENCA show host Dr. JJ Tabane and political analyst and Power FM talk show host Lukhona Mnguni sent a legal letter to the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Lechesa Tsenudi, demanding that the election of the Speaker be conducted through a secret ballot. They claim that the African National Congress National Chairperson, Gwede Mantashe, gave an illegal instruction to the party caucus to nominate the current Speaker, former Minister Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, to her position. So did the 2 gentlemen cross the line? Can you be a journalist and an activist at the same time? Were they just exercising their constitutional right as citizens of this country? Joining us is Lukhona himself, Power FM radio host and political analyst, and Themba Siputokele, journalist, communication strategist, and media trainer. And we invite you, the viewer at home, or wherever you are, to share your views on this matter. Let's start with you, Mhlekazi Mnguni. Why? Why this letter?
Rams, good morning, and good morning to your viewers. I think, to us, the letter was just a part of the exercise of holding power accountable, because there are many facets in which you can hold power to account. And one, it's through media platforms such as yourselves, where we get invited, especially myself, get invited to share my thoughts and my analysis of what is going on and perhaps what should be going on. But, Rams, we cannot always be in the business of talking and becoming complacent that our talk is enough to move or shift the needle of the conversations. And in fact, I think with the benefit of hindsight, that letter achieved quite a number of things, because it actually sparked a greater focus on the actions that have been happening over the last 2 weeks. The secret ballot part was really a last demand of resort. Schedule 3, Part A, in Part A of the Constitution allows for the secret ballot where there are more than one nomination for that position of Speaker. Our demands were quite clear that the President of the country conflated his role as President of the country and of the ANC when he did a cabinet reshuffle and told us that Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula would be deployed elsewhere. He had a destination in mind. It's not for him to deploy to the National Assembly as President of the country. And in fact, I am much more curious about what has become an academic question as to whether or not a president who is the head of the executive can purge leaders of the legislature, that being the National Assembly, which could potentially weaken that body and make sure that the National Assembly doesn't hold the executive to the president not conflicted.
On that note, Lukhona, sorry to interrupt. So who's we? I know it's New Nation Movement. Whose New Nation Movement? Is it the political organization? Who are you?
Well, Rams, myself, JJ Tabane, as you said, we had a conversation. We spoke to New Nation Movement because they take these issues very seriously. You'll remember that they have taken an issue of the independent candidates not being able to feature in national and provincial elections all the way to the Constitutional Court, and a groundbreaking judgment has now forced us to have a conversation about electoral reforms. So New Nation Movement is a civil society organization that is very much concerned about questions of participatory rights in our democracy, ensuring the broadening of the political space to independent candidates, exactly to try and foster greater accountability and build a much more vibrant parliament that would be able to hold the excesses of political power by the executive in check and to account. That's who we are. At least the people that are on that letter, those are the individuals, those are the people.
Temba Siputukelo, did our colleagues, and we're now going to separate New Nation Movement, we talk about Lukhona and JJ, did they cross the line, or were they just doing what citizens are supposed to do constitutionally?
Rams, good morning to you, good morning Lukhona, and good morning to the viewers. Firstly, let me preface this discussion, Rams, by saying that journalists are themselves political actors. Whether Lukhona and JJ are not journalists, but however, they are political actors in this political arena. Therefore, then, they should be allowed space to do their work. However, here is one of the biggest problems that lies, that they pick themselves up as JJ and Lukhona to be leading something that they shouldn't be leading. This is where one believes that they little bit cross the line, because they've entered into a political terrain which is the purview of a political party or political parties. And most of those parties, some of them like the EFF, stayed away from their civil duties that they should have done. Therefore, then, this kind of action will be, or it is misconstrued, as then the two of them and the New Nation Movement playing the role of a political party. However, they should have used all the means and other platforms that is at their disposal. They write columns, they host shows where they can stimulate debate, but to enter a terrain that is the purview of politicians and parliamentarians, that's where they have really, in football terms, they are offside. And that's where, and they are not only offside, they are offside, it's a player who's an offside and also kicks the ball. They deserve to be yellow carded for that kind of action. Because there are three things that I want to talk about. They have rights, they have roles, and responsibilities. Therefore, then, as the media or influencers or analysts or experts, they should have checked what their specific roles are. There's a role that should be played by political parties, and there's a role that should be played by the media and analysts and influencers and stuff like that. That's where one says that, two, they have crossed the line, because even their letter, really, it was just, seems like a stable and fallible exercise which didn't achieve that result, but created one controversy, which is quite good, but created also a debate where now we have to flip the mirror. What role should they play?
Temba, is it unusual though? I mean, I know of Zwelakhe Sisulu, New Nation, Kai Pega, your friend, South in the Western Cape, Strini Moodley, with I think he's the New African in Durban, Max Dupree, Freya Viekblad, Anton Haber, Weekly Mail, Before the Mail and Garden. I can name a lot of colleagues of the past. Agriklaste, your hero, they played in the political space.
Yes, you're quite right. Hence I said, journalists, editors, those are people who are political actors. They are not supposed to be passive passengers or perpetual pedestrians. But I'm saying now, JJ, my esteemed colleague, Lukhona, my esteemed colleague, they played into a terrain that is a purview of politicians as much as they can influence the agenda. They went into play into the role saying that stop the process. This, when you talk about Agriklaste and the legislature, they were actively involved on issues that pertained and affected the media directly. But these are issues that affect parliamentarians. Therefore, that as much as freedom of the press, freedom of speech, expression is important. But my colleagues here, hence I'm saying they are offside I'm using that football analogy, whereby they entered into a terrain that is a terrain for political parties, also politicians, parliamentarians who are in parliament. They are not in assembly. How do you therefore then want to force something that you are not there? That
Lukona,
you have no control of.
Lukona, have you inadvertently at least painted yourself into a political corner as Themba? And many people have said in the last 4 days on social media, I know your blood is on the wall already.
Rams, look, I like what Themba agrees upon, that indeed journalists and media personnel generally are political players with particular roles and responsibilities. But this is a label I have resisted for with good cause, particularly, and JJ himself resists this. I'm not a journalist. I've never been one. I don't aspire to be one, nor do I pretend to be one. I think journalism and journalists are very specialized people with a particular set of roles and responsibilities in society. Let us disabuse ourselves, Rams, of a few things. If you go back to the foundation of media in South Africa, particularly black-owned print media, if you look at the likes of the John Tengo Jabavus, the likes of Khubusana, the likes of John Langalbalele Dube, Sol Plaki, and so on, not only were they, starting those papers, but they were actively involved in the politics of the day. This highly liberalized outlook in terms of what media ought to achieve in a society such as ours, where there's great suffering, great injustice, great manipulation of state institutions, is actually to an extent quite disingenuous, if not to a great degree dishonest. And that is why you must ask, Rams, when a paper says, don't vote for Zuma's ANC, and that was the Mail and Guardian editorial, I think 2014, 2016, and then you get the News 24's editorial saying that people must support the President Ramaphosa to succeed and so on, so the vote would not be for the ANC but would be for Ramaphosa. What are those media entities doing? That is far bigger than any other act to actually take a stance as to how people should vote rather than inform them about their political options and choices that are there. But as a media house, you take a stand. That is entering actively the political terrain. We work in the political terrain.
But
political science as well. So where do you separate the Lukona who curates conversation in media platforms and the Lukona who is an activist?
But Lukona, let's separate. I mean, when a media house takes that position, and it's not an unusual thing, it happens all over the world. I've always believed that if you have a position that you stand for as a newspaper, as a broadcaster, do so. It becomes difficult then when it's Lukona now at the coalface. What happens tomorrow when you have to interview the Speaker of the National Assembly, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula?
What happens when I have to interview Enoch Godongwana, whom I have called out on my show as undeserving to be the Minister of Finance? Does he feel prejudiced when he comes to my show? So it's equally the same. Rams, I think we must separate issues, and that's why politicians try and separate issues. When they come on air, I'm governed by the broadcasting code of conduct, and I must adhere to those things. If I'm still interviewing with fairness, if I'm pressing and probing in the right manner, then all is well. It's all systems go. Politicians should not run away from people they believe that hold a different view to them. What happens when I have to interview the president, whom I do not always say the best of things? I interviewed him beginning of this year, and we had a very robust engagement. So I don't think we must fear that politicians are doing us a favor when they come to media platforms. That's why they should go to media platforms of all value systems, of all ideologies, outlooks, because we are not all of the same outlook, because now we would be creating a problematic where we pretend that there is some form of uniformity across media houses and that it doesn't exist.
I'm going to ask you a question that's been floating around in the social media space, as simple as I can ask it. Are you doing the bidding for the Tumamina group?
I mean, Rams, these are mischievous and distracting questions. I have an issue that is before the public protector currently on one of the ministers in terms of action that they took with their department. When that report comes out, if I favorably get the outcome I want, whose bidding will I be doing? When I took Helen Zille to the Equality Court last year, whose bidding was I doing? And we were thrown out of the Equality Court in Durban on jurisdiction matters, and we considered going to the High Court, but there were resource implications for that. The point I'm trying to say, Rams, is that I think this letter is being misconstrued extremely out of place, because people actually don't even know the people behind this letter and what level of activism work we do in this country on the day-to-day. It has got nothing to do with Tumamina. It has got nothing to do with Ramaphosa. You can go to the history books there. I've got almost 10 open letters to President Zuma. When a journalist writes an open letter to the president instead of reporting, now I'm talking about a journalist, why don't we say that is political action? Why don't we say that is incorrect and they should stick to reporting about the president and let society make up its mind?
We want to hear from you, by the way, on Twitter. That's at SABC_MNS. And you can also call us on 011-714-6841. Do you think that this event has impacted your view of the media? Let me ask Temba. You would have followed social media debate about this issue. You would have seen colleagues taking on each other on this matter. And as I said, you would have also seen the blood of our two colleagues on the walls there. Do you think, and I don't want to place too much responsibility on the shoulder of Lukhona and JJ, but do you think that they could impact on how society views the media going forward, or at least some part of society?
The truth is, the media on its own is a contested terrain. What I like about this controversy is that it has sparked a debate. The media cannot hide away from either accounting or being discussed as part and parcel of the society, because the fourth estate on its own plays a quite critical and important vital role in our society in stimulating debate. However, coming back to the point, and also the things that Lukhona is trying to justify, there is nothing wrong in using available space and platforms like writing opinion pieces. You are not directly seeing yourself as if you are now invading the space of political parties and parliamentarians. The space where they went one step too far. Nothing wrong using the platform on TV, on radio, to newspapers to articulate their points or to ensure that the conversations and discussions, but to literally, as individuals who are shaping society's perceptions and influencing the agenda, to literally go into a space where it's reserved for a number of political parties, number of parliamentarian seats, for them to go there and play there, that on its own is quite a dangerous thing to do. Nothing wrong in influencing the agenda, nothing wrong in having discussions.
Okay.
But to take the fight there, that was something that is really unprecedented.
Well, let's hear what society has to say. This is media and society after all. Kondile in Mangaung, good morning, and what's your point? Each other.
Journalism in its nature advocates for truth, peace, and democracy. And I think colleagues there who would want to advocate or represent democracy, maybe truth, I don't know about peace. But Rams, let's check at this thing. Historically, most politicians comes from the journalism practice, including the Daily Chaser himself. I know that he's from my province. He was once a journalist and so. But it doesn't happen the other way around, where you find a practicing journalist engaging into the same space that Lukhona and the JJ do.
And Kondile, I'm running out of time. Let me ask you this question, Kondile. Let me ask you: is it not time that it starts happening? Maybe the times have changed.
No. I 100% that the times have changed, and maybe this is the right time for us to discuss this. I do not want to blame the colleagues, but journalism itself has changed. The political environment has changed. Everything is changing. So maybe it's the right time for us to really engage into this. But just as a parting shot, Winston Churchill himself was a journalist before he became the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Pondile. Let's conclude then. Lukona, are you happy that you've made your point, that your position has not tainted your stance as a journalist, and we can all move on? In 30 seconds.
I'm not a journalist. We must have a conversation one day about what media is and what journalism is, so that we separate the issues and are able to probably put into compartments people where they belong, and not frustrate the conversation by overly wanting to label people as journalists, because that is the wrong starting point. They are media actors. They're in various degrees. The media space itself, as Temba said, it's contested. And why is it contested? Probably we need one day to just spend time having a debate about media and what media is and how different actors find themselves in the media space, but do not in any way forego their status that they held before they came into the media space, such as myself, genuinely quite an activist. All my life, that's what I've done, and that's what I will continue to do, holding power accountable, especially when many want to lose the ball.
Okay, Lukona, I'm sorry I've run out of time, but gentlemen, thank you to the both of you, and we shall have this conversation going forward. Unfortunately, we had glitches at the beginning, and we lost time. Thank you for watching and participating on Media and Society on the SABC News channel. Independent and impartial. From me, Rams Mabote, goodbye and God bless.